Welcome to our deep dive, everybody. Today, we're going to explore something super cool, I think.
Definitely cool.
It's artificial leaves, right?
Right.
Sounds like something straight out of science fiction, you know?
Yeah, it does.
We've got all this awesome research about this new
A
technology,
lot of exciting stuff.
and it's all about, making fuel, but get this from thin air.
Mm-hmm. Pretty wild, right?
I'm so ready to break this down with you.
Absolutely.
So, before we get too far, can we just clarify what exactly an artificial leaf is?
Sure. It's basically a device trying to do what plants do, photosynthesis.
Oh, right.
But instead of making like sugar, it uses sunlight to turn carbon dioxide into, usable fuel.
Wow. So that's the fuel that could, power our cars and houses someday.
Exactly. And even cooler, it could grab carbon dioxide straight from factories or even just the air around us.
Seriously?
Yeah, it's like turning pollution into something we need.
That's pretty incredible. Almost sounds too good to be true, though. How's it actually work? What's the science behind it?
Well, it starts with some really, really cool materials.
Okay, like what?
There's this thing called perovskite.
Perovskite.
Yeah. It's like a mix of organic and inorganic stuff that's crazy good at absorbing sunlight. Think of it as a super efficient solar panel.
Ah, so perovskite catches the sunlight and then what?
Right. That sunlight powers the process of turning the CO2 into fuel, basically.
Okay, I'm following.
But there's another twist. They're actually using glycerol instead of water in this process.
Glycerol. Is that in soap?
Yep, that's the one. And the cool thing is, using it is more efficient than water. And it also makes these useful byproducts.
Byproduct.
Yeah, like stuff that goes into medicines and cosmetics,
Oh, hold on. So we could be powering our cars with a byproduct of soap.
In a way, yeah.
That's wild. What
Yeah.
about the those super efficient catalysts they're using?
Oh, you mean the copper nanoflowers?
Nanoflowers, right.
They're tiny, microscopic structures shaped like a flower. This, it increases their surface area a ton, so they can speed up chemical reactions.
It's like little factories making fuel, basically.
Perfect way to put it. And here's the biggest deal, the real breakthrough. Older catalysts mostly made single carbon molecules, not great for fuel, but these nanoflowers make ethane and ethylene, which are building blocks for so many fuels and chemicals.
So it's like they're upgrading the fuel,
Yeah.
making it way more useful.
Exactly.
That's awesome. Are there any challenges in making this whole thing work?
Well, perovskite is pretty new. Scientists are still figuring out how to make it last longer and make sure it's, eco-friendly.
Right.
But the progress is amazing. They've already got efficiencies over 29%.
That's really impressive. So it seems like we've got the basics right. Perovskites catch the light, the copper nanoflowers do their catalyst thing, and the glycerol fuels the whole process.
You got it.
It all comes together to make something that could completely change how we use energy.
Potentially, yeah.
Okay, so zooming out a bit, where does this fit in with all the talks about renewable energy and, climate change and all that?
This tech could be huge. Imagine factories and power plants, not just stopping pollution, but actually making the air cleaner while making fuel at the same time.
Whoa. Pretty amazing, right?
That sounds like, almost too good to be true again.
I know.
But it seems like it could really happen with this artificial leaf tech, right?
It's definitely a possibility.
So I'm curious, are there any real examples of this stuff being used yet?
It's still early, but there are some really cool pilot projects and research going on, testing artificial leaves in different places.
Oh, really?
Yeah, some researchers are trying to put them right into industrial processes.
You mean right where the CO2 is coming out?
Exactly. Capture it and turn it into fuel right there.
Genius. So what about using this in our houses or even our cars? Could that actually happen?
Oh, totally. Researchers are working on making smaller, more portable artificial leaf systems.
That's awesome. Yeah, imagine rooftop gardens that not only give you fresh food, but also power your whole house. Or electric cars that can recharge themselves using sunlight and CO2 from the air.
That's mind-blowing. The possibilities are, endless,
No,
right?
absolutely. And that's what makes this whole field so exciting. There's so much room for new ideas and discoveries. Who knows what amazing breakthroughs are coming next?
I can't wait to see. But for now, let's take a quick break. We'll be back to dig deeper into how artificial leaves are being developed and tested in the real world.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the world of artificial leaves.
It's kind of wild to think we could be this close to a totally clean energy future.
Mm-hmm.
And it's all thanks to these tiny devices.
Crazy, right?
Before the break, we were talking about some of the potential applications,
Yeah.
like how this could be used in the real world. Are there any projects, actual projects or initiatives happening right now?
Definitely. One of the coolest areas is integrating artificial leaves right into like industrial processes.
Oh,
For example, imagine a cement factory that instead of spewing out CO2, it's capturing it
okay.
and turning it into fuel right there.
On site.
Yeah,
On site.
that's amazing. It's like turning pollution into something useful.
Exactly.
Are there other industrial settings where this tech could work?
Oh, tons. Steel production is another big one. It's a huge source of CO2 emissions.
Right.
And researchers are looking at ways to use artificial leaves in the steelmaking process too.
To capture the CO2.
Yeah, capture and then use those emissions.
Oh. It seems like, this technology could really make a dent in industrial emissions.
Yeah.
What about like beyond heavy industries?
Well, a lot of people are really excited about using artificial leaves in cities, urban environments.
Okay.
Picture this buildings covered in these green panels that not only look awesome.
But also like clean the air and make energy for the building.
Wow.
It's like turning our cities into like sustainable ecosystems.
That's a really cool vision.
Right.
Yeah, it would be amazing to see cities become, more green and more energy efficient.
Absolutely. And, in more remote areas, artificial leaves could be a really reliable source of clean energy.
Yeah.
Especially for like off-grid communities, so they don't have to rely on fossil fuels so much.
So they could live more sustainably.
Exactly.
That's great. Are there any specific examples of these like urban or off-grid applications that are actually being developed right now?
There are. One that I think is really interesting is a group that's developing like portable artificial leaf units.
Portable.
Yeah, portable.
Okay.
And the idea is that they could be used in disaster relief.
Oh, wow.
So if there's a natural disaster and the infrastructure's all messed up,
Right.
these units could provide clean energy and even clean drinking water.
That's remarkable. It sounds like, this technology could be like truly life-saving in those situations.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
It really is. So we've talked about, all these potential uses for artificial leaves.
Yeah.
But what about the challenges? What are some of the biggest hurdles that researchers are still facing, in developing and actually getting this tech out there on a larger scale?
Good question. Cost is a big one.
Yeah, bet.
The materials themselves are getting cheaper, which is great.
Okay.
But actually making artificial leaves, the manufacturing process, it's still pretty complex.
Oh, I see.
And expensive. So researchers are trying to, simplify that process so it's more cost effective.
Right. So more people can actually use it.
Exactly.
Makes sense. So it's all about like finding that balance between efficiency and affordability.
Yeah, exactly. And then there's also durability.
Yeah, that makes sense.
If these things are going to be out in the world, they need to be able to handle, weather and everything.
Right. Rain, wind, all that.
Yeah, all that. So researchers are testing out different materials and designs, trying to make them last longer.
To make them tougher, basically.
Yeah. And then, of course, there's efficiency.
Yeah.
Like, how much fuel can we actually squeeze out of these systems?
Yeah, that's a big one.
Scientists are always, tinkering with the design, trying to make them better.
To make them more efficient?
Exactly. Remember those copper nanoflowers?
Oh, yeah, the tiny flower-shaped things.
Right. Well, they're experimenting with different shapes and sizes of those.
Ah, interesting.
To see if they can, boost fuel production even more.
I see. So it's like they're like fine-tuning the engine of these little fuel-making machines.
That's a great way to put it.
It's amazing to think about, all the different pieces of this technology that researchers are working on.
Yeah, there's a lot going on.
It feels like there's this constant, like, drive to innovate and make things better.
Absolutely. And as the research continues, we're going to see even more breakthroughs, I'm sure of it.
That's exciting.
Yeah. The future of clean energy is, it's looking pretty bright.
It really does. Okay, so we've talked about a lot of the potential benefits of artificial leaves.
Uh-huh.
But are there any, like, downsides or risks that we should be thinking about?
That's a really important question. One thing to consider is the environmental impact of like actually making and then getting rid of artificial leaves.
Okay.
So, we need to make sure that the whole manufacturing process is sustainable and that we have, good ways to recycle or dispose of them at the end of their life.
So it's not just about like the energy they produce, but also about the whole life cycle of the device.
Exactly. And we also need to think about what happens to people and the economy if this technology really takes off.
What do you mean?
Well, as it gets better and cheaper, it could disrupt industries that are around now.
Oh, right.
And maybe even lead to, like, job losses in those industries. So we have to think carefully about how to manage that transition.
Yeah, so it's not just about the technology itself, but also about like the impact it has on people.
Right. And it's important to remember that artificial leaves aren't like a magic solution to climate change.
Okay.
We still need to work on using less energy overall.
Yeah.
And just, living more sustainably in general.
I agree. It's not just about finding new sources of energy. It's also about changing how we live and how much we consume.
Absolutely. Artificial leaves can be a powerful tool.
Yeah.
But they're just one part of a bigger solution.
That's a good point. Well, I feel like we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive.
We have.
The science, the potential uses, the challenges, even some of the bigger societal and economic questions.
For sure.
So is there anything else we need to explore about this tech?
Actually, there's one more thing I want to talk about. Is the idea that artificial leaves could go beyond just making fuel. Researchers are looking at ways to use these systems to actually make a whole bunch of different products.
Really?
Yeah, things like medicines, fertilizers, even building materials.
Wow. That's incredible.
It's like turning these leaves into tiny sustainable factories.
That's wild.
Right.
Welcome back. We've been talking all about artificial leaves, and it seems like they have the potential to completely change so many things.
Yeah, and there's even more. Like we were saying before the break, these systems could do way more than just make fuel.
Right. We were talking about using artificial leaves to make other useful stuff.
Yeah.
Like what kind of stuff exactly?
Think pharmaceuticals, like medicines and stuff, or fertilizers, even building materials, potentially.
Seriously.
That's amazing.
So it's like turning these leaves into, like you said, tiny little factories that can make almost anything.
It's kind of like that, yeah.
Yeah.
And the really cool part is we're using totally sustainable stuff to make these products. Sunlight, CO2, water, that's it.
It's like totally eco-friendly manufacturing.
Yeah. Exactly.
This is blowing my mind. So how is that even possible? How do you get an artificial leaf to make all that different stuff?
It's all about controlling the chemistry, the reactions happening inside the artificial leaf.
Oh, right.
Researchers can tweak things, change the catalysts and other parts to make those reactions produce different things in the end.
So you can just adjust it to make whatever you want, basically. Like instead of fuel, you could make, I don't know, a medicine or some kind of biodegradable plastic.
You got it. It's like having a super adaptable manufacturing system.
Wow. What are some of the things that are happening right now in this area that are the most exciting?
One of the most promising things is using these leaves to create fertilizer.
Fertilizers?
Yeah, right now fertilizer production is a big problem. It produces a lot of greenhouse gases.
Oh, right, yeah.
But imagine if we could make fertilizer with nothing but sunlight, air, and water.
That would be huge.
Totally. It would completely change how we do agriculture.
So fertilizers. Yeah. What else? Are there any other examples of stuff they're already making?
Researchers are experimenting with hydrogen production.
Okay.
Hydrogen can be used as a clean fuel or as a building block for lots of other chemicals.
Right, so fertilizer, hydrogen.
And even biodegradable plastics. That's a big one they're working on.
Biodegradable plastics, wow. It seems like there's no limit to what they could make with these artificial leaves.
I know, right? It's super exciting.
But realistically, what are the big things they still need to figure out to actually make this stuff happen?
Scaling up production is a big challenge. Most of this stuff is still in the, experimental phase.
Right.
They have to figure out how to make these products on a much larger scale if they want to, actually sell them and stuff.
Yeah. It's one thing to, make something in a lab, but it's got to be, practical to make a lot of it.
Exactly. And then there's cost, as always.
Makes sense.
Even if they figure out the whole mass production thing, they have to make these things affordable. They have to be able to compete with the stuff we already have.
It always comes down to that, doesn't it?
It often does, unfortunately. But, there are lots of people working on this, trying to make it work.
It's good to hear.
There's a lot of interest, from governments and private companies, too. Lots of money going into research and development in this field.
That's good. So, as we wrap up our deep dive here, what's The one thing you really want our listener to walk away with, like the main point about artificial leaves.
I think the biggest takeaway is that, we're seeing something really big happen here.
Mm-hmm.
This tech, artificial leaves, it could change not just how we get energy, but how we make so many of the things we use every day. And it could do it all in a way that's good for the planet.
Yeah, it's a totally new way of thinking about manufacturing.
Exactly.
Well, this has been an amazing conversation. It's been really cool to explore this whole new world with you.
Thanks for having me. It's always fun to talk about this stuff.
And for our listener, thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Artificial leaves, they're pretty incredible, and the future with them looks really, really bright.